haunted by the driving rain, a sea of faces awaited at the Palisados airport the arrival of a living legend. To some, he was the King of Kings, the Lion of Judah, even a god. But to most, he was a mild-mannered monarch who had won the respect and admiration of Jamaicans. The air was charged with excitement as anxious, expectant faces searched the skies for the first glimpse of the great silver bird that would bring their hero to Jamaican soil for the first time. Members of a local cult, the Rastafarians, who were easily distinguished by their long beards and unshorn locks, and who worshipped this figure as a deity, were present in full force. Boisterous, tumultuous welcome ever given to any visiting or local celebrity, His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I, Emperor of Ethiopia, arrived. The crowd erupted into a frenzy of rejoicing as they broke through the lines of soldiers and police and surged out onto the tarmac, eager to engulf the Emperor with their affection. Ceremonial welcome that was planned had to be abandoned as the avalanche of men, women, and children swept away all semblance of order. Ethiopia, a monarchy on the eastern side of Africa, has been governed since 1930 by Haile Selassie, whom history records as being a direct descendant of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Jamaica was among the places visited by His Imperial Majesty on his tour of the Caribbean area. Huge crowds jostled for choice vantage points all along the route in the hope of seeing the Emperor. George VI Park, thousands also awaited his arrival. Cenotaph, His Imperial Majesty laid a wreath in memory of Jamaicans who gave their lives in both world wars. The tomb of the noted Jamaican patriot Marcus Garvey was also visited by the Emperor. The royal party next drove to Jamaica House, the official residence of the Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Sir Alexander Bustamante. Was introduced to Sir Alexander and Lady Bustamante by the acting Prime Minister, the Honourable Donald Sangster. The National Stadium was the scene of the civic welcome extended by the government of Jamaica to His Imperial Majesty. Prime Minister read the address of welcome.
Your Imperial Majesty, I have the great honor to express to you, on behalf of the government and people of Jamaica, a most warm and sincere welcome. This, your first visit to Jamaica, is for us, Your Majesty, a most important and significant event. We have long hoped for this occasion, and your presence with us today is assuredly, Your Majesty, a high point in our history.
Mr. Eustace Bird, one of the two KSAC commissioners, presented the keys of the city to the Emperor. His Imperial Majesty and his party were treated to displays staged by the military and young schoolgirls. Was King's House, the official residence of His Excellency the Governor-General, Sir Clifford Campbell. His Imperial Majesty was introduced to many dignitaries and members of the Rastafarian cult in full regalia. Afterwards presented gold medallions to the Rastafarians. Then it was our turn for gift-giving. At a formal reception at King's House, the government of Jamaica presented gifts to the Emperor and to his grandchildren, who accompanied him on the tour. Flanked by officials of state and the military, he was escorted across the lawns of King's House. There, on a balcony, he settled back to enjoy a Jamaican concert under the stars. heralded the opening of another session of Parliament at Gordon House. This session would be addressed by His Imperial Majesty. Escorted to the saluting dais for the playing of the national anthems of Ethiopia and Jamaica. He was then ushered into the council chamber. The Emperor's address to the Assembly and people of Jamaica was in his native Amharic and was translated by a member of his party.
I had always wished to come and visit Jamaica. Now, thank God, this wish of mine has been fulfilled. Upon arrival to Jamaica, I have seen more than I had expected. I have seen the progress of the people, and I have seen their determination to march forward in unity towards greater progress. I have also witnessed personally the extent of the feeling of the Jamaican people to the Ethiopian people. Again, I wish to take this opportunity of expressing my thanks to the government and people of Jamaica for the fraternal reception that was accorded to me.
Among the academic institutions visited by His Imperial Majesty were Jamaica College, the College of Arts, Science and Technology, and Mico College. And here at Mico College, one of Jamaica's oldest teacher training institutions, he was met by the principal, Mr. Glenn Owen. Escorted inside, he was invited to sign the visitor's book. And a gift was presented to him by one of the pupils. The University of the West Indies is one of the institutions of which Jamaicans are justly proud. It covers 650 sprawling acres at the foot of the Long Mountains in St. Andrew, and it has recently been granted full independent status by the University of London. Members of the faculty, student body, and prominent citizens gathered to witness the ceremony in which the honorary degree of Doctor of Laws will be conferred on His Imperial Majesty. Philip Sherlock, Vice-Chancellor of the University, conferred the degree. The Emperor's reception for the Governor-General and people of Jamaica was held at the Sheraton Kingston Hotel. The atmosphere was cheerful and informal, as Jamaicans from all walks of life chatted and joked together and raised friendly glasses in a toast to the continued health and happiness of His Imperial Majesty. As a personal gift, the Emperor entrusted to the government the funds to erect a school. At the chosen site on Payne Avenue, hundreds gathered to witness the stone-laying ceremony. In appreciation of the Emperor's generosity, the government decided to offer a scholarship to an Ethiopian student tenable at the University of the West Indies. The foundation stone was laid by the Emperor himself.
I'm the conquering lion of the God of Judah.
Chanting, placard-bearing Rastafarians swarmed all over the Kingston railway station as they awaited the arrival of the Emperor. This was the beginning of a journey by rail across the island to Montego Bay Airport, from which the Emperor and his party would depart. The train stopped briefly at Spanish Town, but the vast multitude, carried away by emotion and enthusiasm, broke out in a wild free-for-all in which several persons were injured. The Emperor was treated to glimpses of the Jamaican scenery. His Imperial Majesty made several stops at various towns along the route. Some of these included Denby, Williamsfield, Magatee, and Montpelier. There he met both prominent citizens and humble folk. He also saw something of our rich heritage of folk dancing. The scene was almost unbelievable. Thousands crammed the streets and lanes and carpeted the rooftops. Many of them were Rastafarians who had come from all over the island to catch a final glimpse of the Lion of Judah. Was sighted, there went up a roar like the voice of 10,000 lions. At Montego Bay Airport, His Imperial Majesty was given the military honors that were thwarted on his arrival at the Palisadoes Airport by the overzealous welcome. Here, strong detachments of soldiers and police kept the huge crowds at bay. The time had come for us to say goodbye. The Emperor had spent 3 days with us, yet it seemed but a few fleeting moments. Haile Selassie, Emperor of Ethiopia, descendant of Solomon and Sheba, had touched the heartstrings of Jamaica as no other stranger had done. He had generated a tidal wave of emotion that had swept the length and breadth of our island and engulfed people with an enthusiasm and affection never before witnessed in the history of Jamaica.
This concludes part 1.
Listen, in this time of tribulation, trials, and judgment, only dread will come over. That means only a God-fearing man will come over. Only dread will come over. Yeah, Babylon never will and morning, yeah. Lord, a Babylon never weeping, and the morning, yeah, weeping, and the morning, because them brother them a drop out. Them not know to come over, only dread will come over. Babylon can't get over, no. Them a dadu with them, Lord. Them a dadu with them. With them a dadu with them, Lord. With them a dadu with them. Only dread will come over. Babylon can't get over. No, no. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Selassie I live forever. Yeah, whip them a dadu with them. Whip them a dadu with them. Only dread will come over. Babylon can't get over. No, no. Hey, sing on that. Bring on that. Ooh, yeah, now. Sing on that. Just a teeny weeny bit, yeah. Ooh, yeah, now. Hey, sing it on that. Sing it on that. Hey, my people. My people. I like everyone to chant along with that. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Sing it on that, sing it on that. Whoa, whoa, now. Whoa, whoa, now. Sing it on that, sing it on that. Sing it on that. Here we go now. Come make we chant them down to the foundation. Chant them down. Come on, everyone. Make we chant them down to the foundation. Chant them down, chant it, yeah. Chant them down to the foundation. Chant them down, chant it, yeah, yeah. Chant them down to the foundation. Chant them down. Let's sing it on that. Bring it on that. Woo. Bring it on that. I like everyone to sing with me. Are you ready? Here we go now. Whoa, now. Whoa, now.
Now for the feature presentation.
This is Lawrence.
That conference took a very strong stand against the remnants, I would say, of colonialism in Africa. Then on Friday, in your address to the General Assembly of the United Nations, you said we Africans will fight if necessary. Does that mean that you think the United African States should use force to liberate the areas still under non-African control in Africa?
ያለፈው ባለፉት ጥቂት ወራቶች ውስጥ የአፍሪካ ዋኖች መሪዎች በአዲስ አበባ ተሰብስበው ግርማዊነቶም ጋባዦች ነበሩ። ይሄ የአፍሪካ መንግስታት ስብሰባ ስለ ኮሎኒያሊዝም ጉዳይ ጠንካራ ሀሳብ አቅርቧል። ግርማዊነቶ ደግሞ ያለፈው ዓርብ ዕለት ከሰዓት በኋላ ለተባበሩት መንግስታት ማህበር ጠቅላላ ጉባኤ ባቀረቡት ንግግር ውስጥ አስፈላጊ ከሆነ አፍሪካ ነፃነት ማውጣት ምናልባት በኃይል ጎዳና እንከተል ይሆናል ብሎ ተናግሯል። አሁን አፍሪካን በእውነት ሙሉ ነፃ ለማድረግ ግርማዊነቶ በኃይል አስፈላጊ ነው ብለው ያምናሉ ወይ?
እንደምታውቁት ሰላም ዓለም ሁሉ የሚጥርበት ጉዳይ ነው። ይህ ሰላም እንዲጠፋ ይልቁንም ትንሾች መንግስቶች ከኛ ጀምሮ አይፈልጉም። የአፍሪካን አንድነት ግን በመልካም ተመስርቷል። ለዚህም ምሳሌ የምንወስደው ስለ አፍሪካ አንድነት የአሜሪካን ህዝብ ምሳሌ ነው። በዚህ አኳኋን አፍሪካን ነፃ እንለቅ ያሉትን መንግስቶች ለመዋጋት ሁለት አይነት መንገድ አለ። ምናልባት በሰላም ይፈጸማል፣ ግን መመከት ደግሞ እንዳለበት ታውቁታላችሁና የመዋጋት ትርጓሜው ሁለት ነው።
In answer to that question, I would say that, as you know, peace has been the objective of the entire mankind, and I may say particularly so of small countries today. We have and we are confident that we have laid down the foundation of African unity at the recent conference that was held in May in our capital, Addis Ababa. Now, for the purpose of bringing African unity, our United States represents a good example for us. Now, for this question of liberation of African countries by use of force is our fervent desire and wish that situations will not come to this desperate stage. But however, as I said yesterday, if there is no recourse for liberation of people under the yoke of imperialism, certainly that may be an alternative which African states would have to consider for the benefit of the continent of Africa.
In the meantime, sir, are the African states providing arms and other assistance to those forces that are fighting against existing regimes in Africa?
ግርማዊ ጃንሆይ ይሄ ከመሆኑ በፊት ግን ለነጻነታቸው በአፍሪካ ውስጥ በልዩ ልዩ ቦታ ለሚታገሉ ሰዎች የአፍሪካ ሀገሮች የጦር መሳሪያና ሌላውን መከላከያ ነገር ያቀብሏቸዋል ወይ?
መጨረሻውን ሰላም ከተፈለገ የጦር መሳሪያ ሀብት ወደ ሰላም እንዲዞር ዋና ምኞታችን ነው። ምናልባት ይህንን የሚደረግ እንደሆነ እኛ የሚያቀብሉት ሰዎች የሚሰጡት ሀሳብ ከነሱ ሊጠየቅ የሚገባ ነው። መቀበል ግን ማንም የሚጠላው
I would like to say that on the general question, I hope that all material, energy and resources that are wasted for the purposes of arms race would cease to be so and would be converted for the purpose of peaceful advancement of mankind. But insofar as passing on arms to freedom fighters throughout Africa, perhaps the best people to us are those that have been considered to have passed such arms. But insofar as the recipient freedom country, freedom-loving freedom fighters are concerned, we understand their motive and it's legitimate.
Sir, as a great supporter of the United Nations, would you think that the United Nations might intervene in Africa and resolve this problem?
ግርማዊ ጃንሆይ የተባበሩት መንግስታት ማህበርን ዋናው ደጋፊዎች ከሆኑ ታላላቅ ሰዎች ግርማዊነቱ አንዱ ናቸው። ለአፍሪካ ፕሮብሌም እንደና ዘዴ ለማምጣት የተባበሩት መንግስታት ማህበር በጉዳዩ በሙሉ የሚገባ ይመስላል ወይ? የተባበሩት መንግስታት በጉዳዩ እንዲገባ በግድ ያስፈልጋል። የሚገባበት ምክንያት የተባበሩት መንግስት ሰላም እንዲጸና መሰረቱ እንደሆነ የተለያየ ሀሳብ ቢኖርበት መጨረሻውን ላይ ትንሽ የሚገባበት ነገር ነው ብለን እናስባለን። Yes, I believe it's imperative that the United Nations come into the picture for solving this important African problem. The reason being that the United Nations, by its own charter, is committed to the preservation of international peace and security, and since African situation is directly relevant to this important task of the United Nations, the United Nations must come in to solve it. There might be difference of opinions in the organization itself, but the resultant effect of the feeling of the United Nations is no doubt in my mind is to help African countries to achieve their independence, and also my desire and hope is in accordance to the statements I've just made.
We'll be back with Meet the Press and more questions for our guest, His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I. But first, this message.
Hello, this is Willie Mays. Highlights of my career are seen on A Man Named Mays.
Sunday at 10, 9 Central Time, meet the man behind the legend in a full-hour special program. It's all there. The famous catch against Vic Wirth, the unbelievable finale of the 51 playoff, and more. Meet DiMaggio, DeRocher, Stengel, and others whose lives were linked to the career of Willie Mays. It's a fascinating close-up on and off the field of one of the most talked-about figures in sports today. A Man Named Mays, Sunday at 10, 9 Central Time. Immediately following Bonanza, America's favorite Western drama. The Cartwrights save a girl's life against her father's wishes on Bonanza at 9, 8 Central Time, just before A Man Named Mays, Sunday on NBC.
The troubled, the sick, children, families, the elderly. Urgent human needs served by many separate agencies. When each must come to you separately for support, their appeals may overlap, become confusing. But when you give the United Way, many campaigns are merged into one. Confusion disappears, waste is eliminated. A single gift reaches the entire community. A once-a-year pledge that means, for a child, hope that she may one day play like other children. For a family, the counseling that may prevent the tragedy of a breakup. For a youngster, someone to guide him through a troubled period. Give your fair share. Let one gift work many wonders. The United Way.
And now, resuming our interview, our guest today is His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I, Emperor of Ethiopia. You've just met Clifton Daniel of the New York Times. Our other reporters are Norman Cousins of the Saturday Review, Milt Freudenheim of the Chicago Daily News, and Pauline Frederick of NBC News. Ned Brooks will be back with us next week. We'll continue the questions now with Mr. Cousins.
Your Majesty, generally, when heads of state take on other jobs in government, they take on the portfolios, let us say, of the foreign minister or the minister of defense. But the one big job you have taken on, in addition to your regular job, is the job of Chancellor of the University. Would you tell us why you have taken on this particular assignment?
ግርማዊ ጃንሆይ ብዙ ጊዜ የመንግስታት ዋኖች መሪዎች እንደ ጃንሆይ ያሉ በመንግስት አስተዳደር ውስጥ የቀጥታ ኃላፊነት የፈለጉ እንደሆነ የውጭ ጉዳይ ሚኒስቴርነትን ወይም የመከላከያ ሚኒስቴርነትን ይወስዳሉ። ግርማዊ ጃንሆይ ግን ይህን ሳያደርጉ የዩኒቨርሲቲው ቻንሰለር መሆንን መረጡ። በምን ምክንያት ነው ይሄንን ያደረጉት?
ዋናው ምክንያት ግልጽ ነው። ለሀገራችን ትምህርት በጣም ጠቃሚ ነው። በአገራችንም ትምህርት ቢኖር ተቋርጦ የነበረውን እንደገና ማደስ አስፈላጊ ስለሆነ ከጠላት ወረራ በኋላ እንደተመለስን የትምህርት ሚኒስቴር ወሰድ። ስለዚህ አሁንም ደግሞ በዚያው በመሰረት ነው ለመቀጠል የዩኒቨርሲቲ ቻንስለር መሆንን መረጡ። ይህም ዞሮ ዞሮ ለኢትዮጵያ ለሀገራችን የትምህርትን ጠቃሚነት አስፈላጊነቱን ስለተረዳ
In answer to that question, I would say that the main reasons why I took this action is actually quite obvious. Education is the most useful thing to our country and indeed to all mankind. During the war, the educational process of Ethiopia was discontinued, but subsequently after the war, we took off where we started from and we had to quicken our pace in order to compensate for lost time of enemy occupation. As soon as our liberty was restored to us, I actually took the portfolio of Minister of Education. Now, I am happy to say I have become the Chancellor of the University. Education being a useful thing for our country, I see no greater thing to which I dedicate myself, and I also say with happiness that it is along this field that I lay down what I consider to be one of my successful records.
በጦር አለቅነታችን እና በትምህርት ሚኒስቴር ለመስራት ያስገደደን ይልቁንም በጠላት ጊዜ የተማሩትን ብዙ ጠፍተውብን ነበርና ለመተካት
Foreign affairs, particularly nowadays, is a very important thing for the development of our countries and for peace and stability. But despite this, we chose to take the portfolio after the war and our liberation of Defense and Ministry of Education. The reason really we have done so is because we lost so many fine young men, people that served their country during the war, and we had to take this measure to quicken the pace of education so that Ethiopia again will be put right on the correct road.
Majesty, do you believe that aid in education from the United States or from the United Nations would be useful to your country and perhaps to Africa in general in its general development?
ግርማዊ ጃንሆይ ለትምህርት ጉዳይ ከተባበሩት መንግስታት ማህበር ሆነ ወይም ከአሜሪካ መንግስት እርዳታ ለትምህርት ማግኘት ለኢትዮጵያና ደግሞም ለሌሎች አፍሪካ ሀገሮች ጠቃሚ መስሎ ይታያል ወይ?
ከአሁንም በፊት የአሜሪካን መንግስት ረድቶናል ለትምህርት ጉዳይ፣ ግን በቂ ነው ለማለት አይቻልም። መጨመሪያ ያስፈልጋል። ከአሜሪካን መንግስት በቀርም ከሌሎች መንግስቶች ሁሉ በየአይነቱ ስለ ትምህርት ነገር እርዳታ አግኝተናል። ይህም በቂ ሊሆን አይችልምና ወደፊት በቂ ሲሆን ድረስ እርዳታ ያስፈልጋል።
The government of the United States of America has been quite generous to us in matter of education, and they have given us help of which we are very appreciative, but we cannot say here that the aid we have gotten from this source, the United States, United Nations, and other international organizations are actually sufficient. The task of education is immense one. It's a matter that takes a great deal of financing to solve. We hope that Ethiopia, as well as other undeveloped countries, will continue to get the assistance of these developed countries.
Mr. Freudenthal.
Majesty, at the United Nations, you expressed dismay at the treatment of American Negroes in some parts of our country. At the same time, you praised President Kennedy's civil rights program and actions. Do you feel, sir, that African leaders and African peoples are being turned against the USA by the news they read of our racial troubles?
ለተባበሩት መንግስታት ማህበር ለጠቅላላው ጉባኤ ባሰሙት ንግግር ውስጥ በአሜሪካ ሀገር የዘር ልዩነትና ድሎት በመኖሩ ግርማዊነቶ ቅር እንዳለው አስረድተዋል። ከዚሁ ጋር ደግሞ አያይዘው የፕሬዚደንት ኬኔዲና የአሁኑ የአሜሪካ አስተዳዳሪዎች ይህንን ፕሮብሌም ከአሜሪካ ፊት ለማስወገድ በወሰዱት እርምጃ መደሰቱንም ገልጸዋል። ይህንን እንግዲህ ስንል በአፍሪካ በአሜሪካ ሀገር የዘር ልዩነትና ድሎት በመኖሩ ምክንያት የአሜሪካ መንግስትና ህዝብ በአፍሪካኖች አይን የተሳጣና የሚሳጣ ይመስላል።
ይህ ጉዳይ በጣም ትልቅ ነገር መሆኑ ስለተሰማን ፕሬዚዳንት ኬኔዲም ስለዚህ ለአፍሪካ በአሜሪካን ስለሚኖሩ ያደረጉትን በንግግራችን ገልጸናል። አሁንም ይህ ነገር እንደ ኢንተርናሽናል ጉዳይ የሚታይ ነገር ስለሆነ ኢንተርናሽናል ጭምር ያስብበታል ብለን ተስፋ አለን። የሰው ዘር ለመለየት ከህግ የወጣ ነገር መሆኑን ራሳችሁም የምታውቁት ነውና በዚህ የማይስማማበት ሰው ይገኛል ማለት ነው።
In answer to that question, I would say, this problem under consideration now is of the highest importance. As you have just observed in posing the question, I have spoken with deep concern about this problem, and also in answer to that question, I would say, this problem under consideration now is of the highest importance. As you have just observed in posing the question, I have spoken with deep concern about this problem, and also I expressed pleasure at the actions that the federal government has taken and proposes to take in order to solve this evil problem. This matter of racial discord and discrimination is really an international matter, and perhaps in the future it will increasingly become so than it is now. Discrimination, gentlemen, violates fundamental human rights. It violates the God of law, the laws of God, and also the laws of man.
Your Majesty, a racial issue, anti-white theme has been used in Africa by Communist China in its propaganda as an effort to turn Africans against Europeans, against America, and also the Chinese would like to turn Africa against the Soviet Union, I think. What effect do you see from this? Is Red China's prestige and influence growing?
ይሄ ልዩ አገሮች የሚገኘው የዘር ልዩነት ጉዳይ መሰረት በማድረግ ቻይኒዞች ቀለማቸው ጥቁር የሆነውን ሰዎች ከፈረንጆች ለመለየትና ለማጣላት ሰፊ ፕሮፓጋንዳ ይዘዋል። ይህም ብቻ ሳይሆን መስኮብንም ከአፍሪካኖች ጋር ለማጣላት ይህንኑ መሳሪያ ለማድረግ ጀምረዋል። የቻይና ኢንፍሉዌንስ በዚህ ረገድ በአፍሪካ ውስጥ እየበዛና እያየለ የሚሄድ መስሎታል ወይ?
ይህ ምስል ለዓለም ላይ ላለው ጉዳይ በጣም ከፍ ያለ ፕሮብሌም ነገር ግን ምስራቆችም ወገን ከምዕራቦችም ወገን ቢሆን እርዳታ ለመፈለግ ግዴታ የሚሆንበት ምክንያት ዓለም እየተፋጠነ ወደ አዲሱ ስልጣኔ ለመሄድ የሁሉ መንፈስ የሚያስብበት በመሆኑ ነው። የመስኮብን ወደፊት የቻይናን ወደፊት እንደገና ትላቅነት ምንም ጊዜ የሚፈርደው ነገር ነው። ምናልባት ሊሆንም ላይሆንም ይችል ይሆናል። ቢሆንም እንደዚህ ያለውን አይነት ማናቸውም በኩል ቢሆን በፍቅር መሳብ ተሸናፊ ነው ይመስላል።
In answer to that question, I would say again, reiterate the importance that this problem of racial discrimination occupies in my mind. I believe both the eastern countries and the western countries will actually collaborate to remove this problem, which is the search of mankind to be found different places of the world, because we all are interested and dedicated to the advancement of the world, in its standard of living, and also the maintenance of peace. And this is one of the conditions precedents for the attainment of this noble human objective. Now, about Chinese influence that have been asked about, I'll only say that to what extent Chinese will succeed in increasing their influence throughout Africa and other countries where colored people live remains to be seen. Whatever I may say here will only become speculation. But, however, I can state categorically that the question of using love, human brotherliness, is the most important means of influencing human beings.
Ms. Frederick. Your Majesty, in view of the African drive against colonialism and South African racism, what is the place the white man will have in Africa? Does he have any choice between leaving or accepting domination by the black man?
Azerbaijan ሆይ በአፍሪካ ውስጥ አሁን ኮሎኒያሊዝምን የመቃወም የዘር ልዩነትን የመቃወም መንፈስ እያየለና እየጠነከረ መሄድ ይዟል። በዚህ አይነት ሁኔታ ነጮች በአፍሪካ ውስጥ ምን እድል አላቸው? በሰላም እዛ ለመኖር ይችላሉ ወይስ በአፍሪካኖች መገዛት የሚጀመሩበት ሁኔታ ይፈጠራል?
የአፍሪካ አንድነት ቻርት ሳይፈረም በተናገርነው ለአፍሪካዎች መሪዎች ገልጠናል። እዚህ ቀደም ኮሎኒያሊስቶች የነበሩት ሁሉ ለኮሎኒ ክፉም ቢያደርጉ መልካም አድርገዋልና ተስማምቶ መኖር አስፈላጊ ነው። አለዚያ ግን ኮኤግዚስተንስ የተባለው ይጠፋል። ስለዚህ ትተው የሄዱትን ደውለታ በመቁጠር ስምምነት እንዲኖር ጠይቀናል። ይህም ይፈጸማል ብለን ተስፋ እናደርጋለን። ነጭና ጥቁር የተባለው መንፈስ እንዲፋቅ ምኞታችን ነው። አንድ ነው። የሰው ፍጥረት ሁሉ በአገር ብቻ ተለይቷል ማለት ይቻላል።
I would say that at the conference of heads of African states that was held last May in the capital city of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, before the signing of the charter, I have told in the speech I have made to the distinguished heads of state that people that were formerly under colonialist regime and who have suffered a great deal must have the generous spirit of wanting to collaborate with their former masters, for otherwise, through vengeance and remorse, coexistence would not be possible, and this would be detrimental to the preservation of international peace. I must say that the black and white, as forms of speech, as means of judging mankind, should be eliminated from human society. Human beings are precisely the same, of whatever color, race, or creed or national origin they may be.
Your Majesty, in the 16th year of the League of Nations, you accurately prophesied its fate. The United Nations is in its 18th year. What do you see for its future and why?
ግርማዊያን ሆይ የጥንቱ የጄኔቫ ማህበር በተቋቋመ በ16ኛው ዓመት ግርማዊያን ሆይ እዚህ የጄኔቫ ማህበር ሲቀርበው የዚህ ማህበር የወደፊት እድል ምን እንደሆነ እውነተኛው ነገር ተናግረው በኋላም ግርማዊነት ያለው ነገር ደረሰ። አሁን የተባበሩት መንግስታት ማህበር በ18ኛው ዓመት ነው። ለተባበሩት መንግስታት ማህበር የወደፊት እድል ምን አስተያየት ያቀርቡልኝ ይችላሉ?
ባለፈው ጊዜ ስንናገርና አሁን ስንናገር ልዩነት ነገር አለ። ማንም ዓለም ቢሆን ሰላምን ፈላጊ ነው፣ አንዱም እኛ ነን። ለዚህ ለሰላም ስራ ዩናይትድ ኔሽን እስካሁን ድረስ እዚህ ከተቋቋመ ወዲህ ብዙ ነገር ሰርቷል፣ ወደፊት ይሰራል ብለን ተስፋ እናደርጋለን። ስለዚህ ለሚመጣው የምንመኘው ዓለም ሰላምን ነው። በዚያ መካከል የሚመጣውን ይህ አይነት ብቻ ነው።
In answer to that question, I would say there is quite a difference in the political circumstances that prevailed at the time I made my speech at the League of Nations and the present time, the speech I made to the United Nations. Now, a question of war or peace is the most urgent matter, and the posing of such a question itself is actually to pose whether mankind will survive or not, because of the gravity of the disturbance of peace. At the present time, the United Nations has got to strengthen itself to achieve and protect the universal peace. My sincere hope on my part is the organization, my sincere belief is that the organization so far has achieved many things for the purpose, for the cause of peace, and in the future, I am hopeful and confident it will continue to expand its activities and strengthen itself so that international peace and security will not even be threatened once.
Thank you very much, Your Majesty, for being with us, and our thanks to our interpreter, Dr. Manasseh. I will tell you about next week's guest on Meet the Press after this message.
The real-life make-believe that was and is Hollywood and the Stars, Monday at 9:30, 8:30 Central Time. Remember Jimmy Cagney in this famous scene? See them all. Rita Hayworth, the one and only Al Jolson. Each Monday, Hollywood and the Stars. Follow me in color at 10, 9 Central Time, Mitch, and time to sing along with Leslie Uggam. And the sing-along crew. Everybody now, sing along with Mitch. For a printed copy of today's interview, send 10 cents in coin under stamped self-addressed envelope to Merkle Press, 809 Channing Street, Northeast, Washington 18, D.C.
Next week, our guest on Meet the Press will be the controversial lady from South Vietnam, Madame New. Now, this is Lawrence Spivak saying goodbye for the Emperor of Ethiopia and Meet the Press.
Join us each Sunday for news in the making on Meet the Press, America's press conference of the air. Later tonight, tune in A Man Called Maze. Tonight at 10, 9 Central Time, in color here on NBC. This is Howard Reed speaking. Meet the Press has been a public affairs presentation.